Mark 13, quick commentary. I'll try to keep this brief. A few remarks. I first read this when I was 15 with a teacher. I did a class with a wonderful guy who later became my English teacher, which is his main job, but he was also the school chaplain and a reverend. And it was my first experience really of reading a book of the Bible all the way through, and Mark is definitely one to read. And what he said then, and I think was in the book we're reading as well, was that Mark 13 is kind of an insert, that it doesn't belong so much with the rest of the gospel. It's of some different kind of quality. And it's definitely in this genre we call apocalyptic. That's why we call it the Little Apocalypse. And in fact, now, especially reading it this time, that just seems so ridiculous. Because since we left Galilee in chapter 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 have all been quite distinctively their own text. It's like these are just added on. They're not kind of built in to any coherent, integrated gospel narrative. And so the idea that 13 is unusual in being an insert seems jolly odd. It was my introduction to apocalyptic, and it does stick with you. It's definitely a Christian feature. It deals with the end of the world, whatever that means, and it's got a distinctive lexis. I'll just give you a list of all the words I wrote down. Suntelestai, or anything to do with telos, the end things. Planatomai, to do with being led astray, being deceived. This phrase, merth or aether, do not be alarmed, occurs just when people are apocalyptizing. Hopomeno, to endure, and the elect, eklektoi, thlipsis, the tribulation. Sozo, save, obviously. Semea kaiterata, signs and wonders, comes up a lot. Pseudo-Christs comes up a lot. Doxa, or doxa, glory, occurs specifically in this kind of eschatological or Christological context. Blepete, agropnata, gregorata, all of these words for be alert, be on the lookout, be awake, be vigilant. Tesseres anemoi, and all these things that describe the four winds, and there's earth and there's heaven, and the ends of the earth, and the beginning of creation. Kairos, the time, and suker, this fig tree which tells us the time. Engus, near. I mean, it usually has this kind of connotation. Pareakamai, passing away. Oh gosh, I'll just say this. Yeah, about dating. It used to be. I'll tell you a story. By this time I was in my 20s, and I was reading a lot of the Bible, particularly the New Testament. And I always assumed that people knew when things happened, because when you read commentaries, there were always dates. And then I happened to read this book. I read dozens of books in my 20s, in the 1990s, about New Testament. But this one by John Robinson was kind of a revolution in a way that perhaps he didn't intend. Basically, his argument was based on this text, saying Jesus is, and this was considered, everyone believed this when I was young, that this text had probably been written after the temple was destroyed, because Jesus is predicting the destruction of the temple. there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. So Jesus predicting the destruction of the temple, and the text coming from after that. And that tended to be the way. And this guy wrote his book, he, like most New Testament books, he really just had one idea, which was kind of weak or disputable or based on false or flabby plot premises or whatever. But he said, actually, if you look at it, it doesn't look anything like what happened in AD 68. I think the temple was destroyed in 70. The Jewish wars, I think, started in AD 68. But for a start, you can go to Jerusalem today and you'll see that it's simply not true, that there's no one stone left on another. You know, there's still a wall there. So that's simply not true. And when you see these signs, you know, people in Jerusalem should flee to the hills, and he says, well, you know, that's not what happened. And so his point was that because the writer of this text probably hadn't had any experience of the destruction of the temple, therefore this was written before the destruction of the temple, and he used this to build a kind of dating scheme where this was pre-68. The significance for me was simply that when I read this book and I looked at how all the dates depended on other dates from other people's speculation, and you could find everything. It said the date of Jesus' ministry and death, and Paul and when he was in which place, and it's all completely speculative. All of these dates are just built on building round other people's dates. It is all complete nonsense. And it's only then that it occurred to me that we really have no idea when anything happened. And that has been my watchword ever since. And I must admit, and I check it every 20 years or whatever, and I can't find a single firm anything to date by. I mean, there are historical events. We know that Pontius Pilate is a historic figure. We can give you his dates. We have a date for the destruction of the temple. We have a date for Bar Kokhba revolt. But none of the things that we're interested in have anything to date them whatsoever. And the more I look at this as a grown man with lots of history behind me, just as I said in the last chapter, almost everything we see here, you know, all of these stories and parables, they're generic. Some of them are pious cliches. Some of them sound like a dispute between Sadducees and Pharisees, but mostly they kind of could be anyone and any time. And this is particularly true of this. I mean, apocalypse is a genre. It upset the Romans terribly. You remember Tacitus tells us about the Great Fire of London, and Nero pinned everything on the Christians, and probably not without reason. This freaked the Romans out, that there was a whole species of people who were constantly thinking about the end of the world in fire and getting very excited about it. That these people, and they were all Jewish, whether they were Jesus Christians or whether they were Christians at all, or whether they were apocalyptic Jews, it doesn't really matter. They scared the willies out of the Romans, and there was a bit of a moral scandal, and that's why they were persecuted. This was my first experience of apocalyptic, and once it gets in your bones, it just stays there. I mean, all throughout the history of Christianity, and obviously before, there were people looking to the end of the world in their own generation. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses are most famous for this, but really, everyone's at it. And the odd thing is people are quiet about it now, and now is the time when it was always anticipated. Archbishop Usher did the numbers, but they were pretty well understood before then. He made it, I think, 4004 BC, the beginning of the world. 6 days, so 4,000 years before Christ, 2,000 years after Christ, and then the following, from year 2000 or 1996 onwards, the millennium, the Sabbath millennium. And it seems to me this has always been the date, and I've always kind of lived with this. I've always had a very strong sense of living in the end times. It makes me very strange. And the odd thing is that it seems to be rather unusual these days. I would have thought there would be lots of people going around saying this kind of thing, but there aren't. Sorry, I'm going to go through and just say how generic everything is. Yes, temples being destroyed, no stone on another. When will these things be? Well, who knows? Don't be led astray. Many will come in my name and say, I am he. Well, that doesn't make sense if Jesus is the Messiah and he's there with them. Ever since, we've been excited about the so-called second coming. They, of course, didn't call it the second coming. Wars and rumours of wars. I mean, that's just, the whole Hasmonean period, basically from the Maccabean revolt. So the last two centuries before Christ were very busy and constantly full of warfare. In many ways, the Roman period was a kind of lull, that you could actually grow up and go through most of your life without being at war, was something that hadn't really happened for quite a long time. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. It's normal stuff. Earthquakes, famines, absolutely. Or birth pains, Odinone. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay, Christians, what will happen to them? Delivered over to councils, beaten in synagogues, bearing witness. Yes, this has become important, certainly in modern times. The gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations. Since they certainly believed that in the 16th and 17th century, that the world couldn't end until the gospel had been proclaimed to all the nations. And it underpins missions today. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and father his child. This is definitely true of the Hasmonean period. One member of a family was backing one faction. Seleucids and Ptolemies, one was backing one faction, the other, and that was just normal. The abomination of desolation, we think, was probably a statue of Zeus, I think, which one of the Seleucids put up. But I mean, it could have been thought of as a future event too. It's wonderful writing. All of this, I would say, is cliche, but it's powerful, memorable stuff. Let one who's on the housetop not go down or enter his house or take anything out. Let one who's in the field not turn back to take his cloak. Ah, yes, don't be pregnant or nursing. Hope it's not in winter. Yeah. Yes, about the Christ. Yes, false Christs and false prophets. Oops, beg your pardon. Yeah, and this to do with the universe, yes. Sun being darkened, the moon will not give its light, stars will fall from heaven, the powers of the heaven will be shaken. It's very much, it's part of the genre. It's part of the genre. Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. I think refers to Daniel, but originally. His elect from the four winds. I think this is fundamental. It may even be the origin of the cross, and certainly in the Galilean mark, eerie mark, all these winds, and it feels like this crowd, people are flooding towards Jesus from all the directions. It feels like this apocalyptic moment. The fig tree, it's a cliche. The fig tree tells you it's time. I sometimes wonder about Mark chapter 11, if it was written by a non-Christian or anti-Christian, at least the fig tree episode, that Jesus curses the fig tree and he's able to do that. But the fig tree was saying it's not time, and that's why Jesus cursed it. But in a sense, it wasn't time. The revolution didn't happen. The temple wasn't destroyed, and near, this word engus, yes. This generation will not pass away. Yes, this excitement. It used to be called elpis, hope. Hope also means expectation, and already Paul was trying to take the heat out of that word, and he kind of devalued it in favour of pistis and agape, and the greatest of these is love. But hope, I think, had this very specific meaning, to be in a state of constant expectation of the passing away of heaven and earth, and the coming of the Lord's day, whatever that means. No one knows the time, and this, yes, stay awake, stay awake. Yeah, in my opinion, everything we've got here is generic. It doesn't make it any the less effective, and a much better read for most people than the book of Revelation.